back at you. A lot of interesting fixtures this weekend. So we're going to get straight into the games.
The big matchup this weekend was City at home versus Chelsea. Both of these teams vying for the top four spot. Mixed results recently. We've seen Manchester City sort of finding their feet again. And one of the things we talked about in the last episode is that we need to see them getting points off their rivals in order for us to really feel like they're back in the mix in terms of competing for the top four. Chelsea, on the other hand, were in blistering form for a while, and as of late, they've been out of form. So this was an interesting matchup. For Manchester City, Pep decided to unleash a couple of his new January transfer signings. Omar Marmoush from Frankfurt starting on the flank, looking very, very bright, looking like he was relishing the opportunity to play for a top team and be in the spotlight. I would contrast that with another debutant, Kusanov, the Uzbek, coming into the City back line, starting at center back, 20 years old, had a little bit more of a difficult start, but obviously he's a young player just coming into a big side like Manchester City, so we don't want to judge him too harshly up front. But all in all, the matchup turned out to be a resounding victory for City at home, 3-1. It started out with Chelsea taking the lead off of a Kusanov mistake, errant header back to Ederson, which Nico Jackson pounced on and played an easy square pass for Madueke to tap in. But we saw City do what they haven't really been able to do, which is respond and to come back and be the stronger team in the second half, as opposed to taking the lead like they have against other teams and then losing it and sort of collapsing in the second half. It was the reverse of fortunes to what we've seen from City more recently. And what I think was notable about the game from Manchester City is the way in which they scored their goals. I believe it was a tactical change and not a coincidence that we saw Manchester City taking Route 1, playing balls over the top, bypassing the midfield, going directly to Haaland or Marmoush to try to get in behind and put the Chelsea back line under pressure right away. And for all three goals, they were balls that were played from the back, either from a defender or from Ederson, bypassing the midfield, putting the attacking player for Manchester City in a 50-50 ball or a 1v1 type of situation where it made it difficult for the defender or the keeper to make a decision on whether to attack the ball, to let it drop, and Manchester City took advantage of it. For Manchester City, I would have to say, based on what we said last week, we wanted to see them play against a rival. We wanted to see a good performance. We wanted to see them playing with belief, confidence in one another. And also, we talked about the tinker box from Pep, right? When he goes and he starts to really think and make some changes, usually over time, good things are bound to happen. And I think that's what we're starting to see. Marmoush came in, and he's a player that is on the front foot, always on the back shoulder of the defender, looking to get in behind. And he was a little bit overeager on certain instances. He was caught offsides a number of times, and he had a great chance to play Foden in for a goal where Foden would have been one-on-one with the keeper, but he saw the bright lights and his name in the headlines and decided to take the shot and scuffed it wide. But all in all, I think Manchester City looking like a team that is a true contender for the top four and started to answer some questions, and the doubts that we had about them are starting to dissipate a bit.
Yeah, and for Chelsea, I'll keep harping on this point. They need the main man, Romeo Lavia. When he's out of that team, they just don't look the same. Other thing I would say is that at the back, Sanchez, the Chelsea fans are a bit frustrated with his performances this season, and he seems to be a player that's lacking confidence, not in good form. When you have a goalkeeper who keeps making mistakes over and over again, nervousness filters through the team when other teams are attacking. So they need to sort that problem out if they're planning to push for a top four spot.
I agree in terms of Sanchez. It just seems like he might not be the right man for the job. Chelsea did bring in another keeper right before the season. Doesn't seem like that player is making the grade as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go back into the market once again, looking for another keeper come the summer. The other thing I want to note about Chelsea is the performance of Cole Palmer, or the lack thereof. This is a player that we talked about earlier in the season. If you recall, we had a bit of a debate about, is Cole Palmer on par with Mo Salah? And my view at that time was no, because he goes missing in certain games. And against Manchester City, he was nowhere to be found. This is a player who's supposed to be the main man, really wasn't able to affect the game at all. And he did have a chance where he had beaten the defenders. Nico Jackson had an open net. All he needed to do, Cole Palmer, was hit an accurate square pass, and it was an errant pass that was overcooked, caused Jackson to have to round the ball, and the chance was gone by the time he was able to collect it. So Cole Palmer, not a consistent performer, and I think if you want to be a top player, consistency is the hallmark of a top player who can come in game after game in difficult circumstances, even when he's not having a good game, and still have a positive impact on the game, which is what we see Mo Salah able to do time and time again. With Lavia, the other thing I would say is that this is a player who hasn't been fit. Chelsea signed him. He was injured when they signed him. They played more games without him than with him. So they need to learn how to win, how to be consistent without him in the team.
Just to respond, and I'm a big fan of Cole Palmer. I just want to raise the point that his numbers indicate that he's one of the best players in the Premier League. At such a young age, I think he has been remarkably consistent over the last 2 seasons. His only 2 seasons in the Premier League. And bear in mind, he was playing against his former club. That emotional attachment can affect particularly a young player. Also, Guardiola knows him very well. And having that insider knowledge, City have a little bit of an advantage in terms of knowing how to nullify the Cole Palmer threat. With Lavia, his injury record is not something that's encouraging. Some players just don't have the body for the game.
Right,
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, that's definitely something we have to watch out for, of course. He's a very, very young player, and you think it's too early to write him off yet. But, that injury record is definitely a concern for Chelsea.
The other big fixture from this weekend, and going to the season, we would never think this would be a big fixture, but Bournemouth at home against Nottingham Forest. Last week we talked about Forest's tough run of fixtures and that we would find out a lot about this team over the coming weeks, this past weekend being one of them. And we saw Bournemouth absolutely thrash Nottingham Forest, 5-0 at home. And it wasn't really even a contest. A hat trick from Utara. We saw Justin Kluivert playing as a 10, coming off a hat trick in the previous week. I believe that was against Newcastle, really pulling the strings, just having a field day against Nottingham Forest. And Nottingham Forest not able to respond in any way, shape, or form. I would say, given what they've been able to achieve this weekend, the remarkable consistency, really the overperformance of all expectations, playing against Liverpool recently and being able to get a draw as well, we have to give them a bit of grace and say it's okay if they had a bad game. And this was a bad game for them, where they didn't really compete, they didn't threaten, they didn't control the game. With that being said, they were missing Callum Hudson-Odoi, and I do feel like when Hudson-Odoi and Elanga are not on the pitch together, Nottingham Forest goes down a couple of notches in terms of their attacking threat. But hats off to Bournemouth. We saw them decapitate Newcastle and then do the same to Forest. So we have to say that this is a team that's in the ascendancy and really starting to threaten the top 4 teams. And maybe they're not in the fight for the top 4 right now in terms of their points, but they are a team that when you look at the table or you look at the fixture list and you see them coming up, you have to take notice. and really prepare for that game, regardless of who you are in the table.
Yeah, I agree. Bournemouth, high-flying team at the moment, in a great run of form. I think they've only lost one game the last 5-6 fixtures, I believe. And we see Justin Kluivert elevating himself into the conversation of being one of the best offensive players in the league. Yeah, I think every team in the Premier League now will look at that Bournemouth fixture with a bit of trepidation.
So thinking about the other fixtures from this past weekend, Arsenal, they were able to grab a victory on the road against Wolves. Some interesting decisions from the referee. I'm just curious about, as an Arsenal supporter, what are your key takeaways and thoughts from the game?
As I discussed in the last episode, I think Arsenal have been very unfortunate this season in terms of the decisions of the officials. We can debate whether the decision was right or was wrong, but I think the number of questionable decisions has hurt their season. On this occasion, Arsenal were fortunate to get a win, having a red card issued. That was a debatable call, controversial, to say the least. And we saw in the game Gomez getting a second yellow for what I viewed as a worse tackle. It was a more dangerous tackle, but it wasn't issued a straight red. So there was a bit of inconsistency in the refereeing. Just something to note. I have to give credit to Arsenal for getting that win, showing some resolve. We saw Calafiori once again coming to the rescue. Again, a cultured left foot finish, showing his quality. And, Arsenal put in a really good shift under difficult circumstances and were able to get the win. So credit to them.
Wolves, not the greatest side, a team that is in a little bit of an uncertain period as their main man, Matheus Cunha, continues to be on the rumor mill for January transfer windows to potentially Arsenal. So for him, that was a big game. And I don't think he performed that well, probably as a result of that. So Arsenal going forward, we have to think that they're still in the run. Despite all the struggles that they've been having with injuries or questionable referee calls, we still find them knocking on the door, Liverpool's door, right? The Arsenal massive will feel good about the result and good about going into the fixture this weekend, which is a home fixture against Manchester City. So what do you see as your prediction? What are the things to look out for?
Well, the key thing to look out for is the lineup, actually. We see Arsenal a bit thinner in terms of personnel. We have some players coming back. We saw that Calafiori is back in the mix. It really depends on the lineup that Arsenal have available. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one.
One player we didn't see in the last fixture for Arsenal was Martin Odegaard. They'll need him against Manchester City. And the one thing I would look out for from an Arsenal perspective, we know they're chasing Liverpool. The thing to note for Liverpool relative to Manchester City and Arsenal, all other teams, is they actually have two fixtures this upcoming game week. So they are playing away against Bournemouth and playing away against Everton. And if they're able to grab both victories, they'll be able to take advantage of that game in hand and extend the lead. So I think going into this game week for Arsenal, that puts a little bit more pressure on them to get 3 points, because if they don't, and Liverpool is able to win both games, we're talking about a 6-point weekend. So very, very important fixture against Manchester City. Manchester City, again, rediscovering their form. So I think this one is going to be a real battle. And with Pep in Manchester City now we see him having options in the attack that we didn't see just a few weeks ago. We see Foden back in full form. He's scored, I think, in the last 4, 5, 6 fixtures within the Premier League. Marmoush is looking like he wants to make an impact. Haaland scoring again, right? So should be a game that Manchester City are going in trying to get 3 points and really make a statement in terms of them being back and being a force to reckon with once again. Okay, well, that's a wrap for this week. Premier Bros, thank you for joining us. Please subscribe if you like what you see. We'll be back next week.